Have you ever wondered why the voice in your head still sounds like your father's? Even after decades, new job, new house, new life, his presence lingers, not as a man, but as an echo. The praise you still chase, the criticism you still fear, the silence that still feels like judgment. Most men think they've moved on from their fathers, but they haven't. They've only internalized him. Jung said the most influential figure in a man's psyche is not the father he remembers, but the imago of the father that lives within him. It's this psychic image, whether loved, feared, or absent, that becomes the model for authority, discipline, worth, and power. This conversation isn't about blaming fathers. It's about recognizing the inheritance every man carries, the emotional DNA that shapes how you relate to strength, order, ambition, and self-respect. Until you make peace with your inner father, you will keep unconsciously rebelling against him or imitating him, sometimes both in the same breath. The father wound doesn't only limit your power, it distorts it. 1. What it actually is and what it isn't. The father wound is not a dramatic event. It's not just an abusive man, a violent household, or a tragic absence, though those are real and devastating. More often, the wound is quieter. A father who was physically present but emotionally absent, who worked hard but never looked you in the eyes long enough to really see you. A father who demanded excellence but never modeled rest. A father who gave rules but not warmth. This wound is not about villainy, it's about distance. It's what happens when a boy's natural longing to be mirrored by his father, to be told, "I see you and you have what it takes," goes unanswered. The psyche doesn't simply shrug and move on, it compensates. Some men overachieve, chasing the praise they never received. Others underachieve, rejecting all authority as a way to protest the one that failed them. Both live under the same spell. Jung said that the father archetype governs law and order, the inner principle that gives structure to life. When that energy is missing or distorted, the man feels one of two things: chaos or tyranny, either the absence of guidance or the presence of domination. The adaptive function, especially in boyhood, is survival. You learned to read the emotional weather of your father's moods. You became hypervigilant, charming, competitive, invisible, whatever kept you safe. That adaptation worked when you were small, but in adulthood it becomes self-sabotage. You keep seeking validation from authority figures, repeating the dynamic with bosses, mentors, and even partners. You conflate discipline with coldness, assertiveness with cruelty, strength with the withholding of affection. You believe that to be powerful, you must also be untouchable. And yet buried under that armor is the gold: sensitivity, longing, devotion, gentleness, the qualities that make a man not only powerful, but human. The father wound isn't a life sentence, it's an initiation, a summons to mature your relationship with power. 2. How it appears in ordinary life. You don't need a therapist to spot the father wound. You just need to look at how you handle authority, criticism, and ambition. When a man hasn't faced this wound, he does one of three things. He overcompensates, becoming the hyperachiever, disciplined, successful, stoic. He builds empires, but every victory tastes like ash because no one is there to witness it. He was never applauded by the father, so he performs for an invisible audience that never claps loud enough. He rebels, rejecting all structure. He resists commitment, calls routine oppression, and interprets every boundary as control. But underneath the rebellion lies dependence, a boy still fighting a man who isn't even in the room anymore. Or he withdraws, numbing out. He keeps his dreams small, avoids leadership, and tells himself he's peaceful, when really he's afraid of the same harshness he grew up under. In daily life, it looks like this. You hesitate to speak up at work when your boss criticizes you because it stirs that childhood fear of paternal disappointment. You find yourself seeking a partner's approval the way you once sought your father's. You grind endlessly, unable to rest because rest feels like weakness, and weakness was never safe in your house. And yet, all this effort doesn't make you feel strong. It makes you feel performative, because deep down, the boy inside you is still asking, am I enough? The answer will never come from the outside. It comes when you turn and realize the father you've been seeking approval from is already living inside you. You just haven't learned to talk to him like a man yet. 3. Origins and the boy who stayed. Let's talk about that boy. The one who looked up to his father not just for rules, but for reflection. Every boy asks 2 questions. Do you see me? And do I have what it takes? When those questions go unanswered, the psyche freezes them in time. You grow older, but part of you never stops asking. Maybe your father was kind but weak, so you became rigid, overcorrecting his softness. Maybe he was powerful but cold, so you learned to hide your warmth to avoid humiliation. Maybe he was absent, so you built a fantasy father out of culture, success, or religion, bowing to ideals that always seemed just out of reach. In each case, the same thing happens. You internalize incompleteness. You measure yourself by the wound. The boy stays, still waiting for a nod of approval that will never come. But here's the truth. You don't need his permission anymore. You need your own. This doesn't mean rejecting your father or pretending he didn't matter. It means seeing him as human, flawed, frightened, doing the best he could with what he had, and then deciding to stop inheriting his limitations as destiny. When you can say, he gave me what he could and I'll build the rest, you free yourself from the cycle of reenactment. That is the beginning of individuation, the process Jung described as becoming who you truly are rather than who your conditioning demanded you to be. 4. Contact without collapse. Facing the father wound is painful because it reactivates old grief, not just for what happened, but for what didn't. The missed conversations, the unspoken pride, the silence that stretched where affection should have been. When that grief surfaces, most men either run from it or drown in it. Neither is necessary. Contact doesn't mean reliving the past. It means witnessing it without illusion. You look at the truth of your upbringing, not to blame, but to understand. You might notice that every time you succeed, you feel uneasy, as if waiting to be cut down. Or that every time you assert yourself, you feel guilt, as if being strong is somehow betrayal. Those sensations aren't random. They are the nervous system of the boy inside you, remembering what power felt like in your house. Dangerous, inconsistent, unpredictable. That memory has been shaping your adult choices. Once you recognize it, you can begin to distinguish between then and now. This reaction is older than this moment. That simple sentence can save years of projection. You are not disloyal for acknowledging that your father hurt you. You are disloyal only if you keep pretending he didn't. 5. Containment before expression. When you start touching this material, a lot will rise. Anger, sadness, compassion, even confusion. The work isn't to release it all, it's to hold it with maturity. Many men, when first confronting the father wound, swing to extremes, either hating their fathers or idealizing them. Both positions are still boyhood, the boy who needs an enemy or a hero. Containment is the middle ground. It's the capacity to feel rage without revenge, grief without collapse, empathy without denial. To see your father as a man, not a myth, not a monster. The moment you do, the spell breaks. you realize that all the power you projected onto him, the authority, the discipline, the approval, was never his to keep. It was always meant to awaken yours. That's the paradox. Once you can hold both love and disappointment in the same heart, you become the adult your younger self was waiting for. 6. Consequences of avoidance versus integration. Avoiding the father wound doesn't erase it, it amplifies it. The man who refuses to face his father will either become him or reject him so completely that he becomes his opposite. Both are forms of bondage. You see it in the man who rules his household with the same coldness that once ruled him, calling it discipline, or in the man who avoids all authority, mistaking chaos for freedom. Both are still orbiting around the same absence. Integration, on the other hand, gives you choices. You stop reacting and start leading. You realize that strength and tenderness aren't opposites, they're allies. You can enforce boundaries without cruelty, command respect without domination, and carry power without apology. When you integrate the father wound, your ambition changes flavor. It's no longer about proving him wrong or earning his ghostly approval. It's about building something worthy of your own respect. That's the shift from performance to purpose, from a boy chasing admiration to a man creating legacy. 7 archetypal framing king, warrior, magician, lover. The father wound, left unhealed, fractures these 4 inner archetypes. When the king is wounded, he either becomes the tyrant, ruling through fear and control, or the weakling, abdicating responsibility altogether. The integrated king knows that true authority isn't noise. It's calm order, firm boundaries paired with generosity. When the warrior is wounded, he becomes either violent or passive. Without the father's guidance, the boy learns that aggression is evil, or worse, that it's the only way to be respected. The mature warrior learns that anger, when purified, becomes protection, a devotion to life itself. When the magician is wounded, cynicism takes over. He hides behind intellect, using knowledge to avoid vulnerability. Integration returns humility, the ability to use insight for transformation, not superiority. And when the lover is wounded, he oscillates between obsession and detachment. He confuses intensity with intimacy because he never learned tenderness from his father. The healed lover loves without losing himself. These 4 archetypes are the pillars of masculine wholeness. When you reconcile with the Father within, the pillars realign. You no longer imitate or rebel against his energy, you inhabit it. 8. Responsibility and witness. No man repairs the father wound by himself. You must face it alone, but you cannot heal it alone. You need mirrors. Other men who have walked this path and can hold your truth without judgment. Brotherhood isn't therapy, it's witnessing. The shared silence between men who finally see one another beyond performance. Responsibility here means one thing. You stop blaming the father you had, and you stop waiting for the father you wanted. You become the father you needed, first for yourself, then for others. That doesn't mean playing savior. It means living with authority that doesn't need to dominate, with warmth that doesn't collapse, with steadiness that doesn't perform. You'll still falter. You'll still feel that boy's ache when approval doesn't come. But each time you stay present instead of running, you reclaim another piece of your strength. That's how power is reborn, not as dominance, but as presence. The father wound is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. The world doesn't need more men running from the shadows of their fathers. It needs men who have faced those shadows and learned to carry them with grace. You may never hear the words you longed for, but you can speak them now through how you live, how you love, and how you lead. You can become the voice your younger self needed to hear. That's what Jung meant by transformation, not becoming someone else, but becoming whole. So stand up. The lineage ends with you. The silence ends with you. The fear ends with you. Be that man, not perfectly, reliably. Begin.